Hello and welcome back to On the Workbench. Today's video is not what I intended it to be. I had originally started shooting a video on the replacement of the spark plugs on a 2008 Saab 97X 5.3 liter GM Vortec engine, but got into the project and realized making a video was going to be quite difficult that was actually useful. So I thought I'd show some tips and tricks in making this repair and some of the tools that you might want and some of the challenges that I encountered along the way. So let's start with the tools. First thing we're going to need is a 3/8" drive ratchet. That should be a given. If you've got a torque wrench, that might work, but the length of torque wrenches might actually get in the way of making the repair. We're going to need a 5/8" spark plug socket, preferably one with a good solid rubber boot that can actually hold a spark plug in it when you flip it upside down, and the plug won't fall out. You'll need that to get to some of the hard to reach areas. You're also going to want a collection of extension rods. If you've got a few 1/2" rods and you've got an adapter that you can put on either end of it to adapt it to 3/8, that will work. I've got 3/8 impact one. I also especially found this little 4" extension rod particularly useful. You absolutely are going to need a universal joint, a 3/8" universal joint. There's just no way around that. And you're going to need one of these chrome kind that have the link in the middle. And to get at cylinder number 2 and the spark plug removed from that, I ended up using a second universal joint, but this was my impact one, because the impact universal joint does not actually have the extra piece of linkage in it that is contained in the other universal joints. And so I could actually line this up in series with the short little extension and taken out. I also found a magnetic pickup tool for trying to remove any drop bits and pieces useful, a 10mm wrench or socket to be able to remove the spark plug ignition coils. There's only one that you might have to do that with. You're also going to need a 3/4" socket for removing the passenger side front wheel well. You want a couple long bladed screwdrivers, either a Phillips or a flathead, perhaps the longer the better. I found some needle nose pliers to be useful that were nice and long for trying to retrieve some parts. You also want the plugs, some dielectric grease, and anti-seize for good measure, as well as a brand new air filter. The first thing we're going to do is remove our cosmetic cover over our GM Vortec engine. This is a 5.3 liter V8 engine. This is found in other vehicles besides the 97X. So if we look under the hood, on the driver's side are cylinders 1, 3, 5, and 7 in sequence, working your way back from front to back. Those are actually relatively straightforward to do, and you can do those 4 in probably about 20-25 minutes. It's the even numbered cylinders, starting with cylinder number 2 in front, 4, 6, and 8, that are a little more difficult. So the reason why you need the air filter, or why you want to just go and buy a new air filter, is you're going to have to actually remove the entire air filter assembly, which is very easy, which just uses 4 Phillips head screws. So now with the lid off, I had to take the wiring harness here off of the plug here on the airflow. And we've got our old air filter here. This is just simply a round cylindrical filter. It's actually in pretty good shape, but if I'm going to be under the hood here, I might as well replace it. This was replaced about 6 months ago, but I'm just going to replace this with a new one anyway, just for good measure. With the air filter off, you can also see the storage tank that holds the windshield wiper fluid, as well as any debris that may have gotten in under the filter. So take a vacuum and clean all that out. With the airbox cover out of the way, we can remove the rest of this manifold assembly by detaching it from the throttle body. I've replaced that in an earlier video, so if you want to see how to do that on this engine, check my channel for the video on how to do that. And so we said to loosen this one hose fitting here. That goes to the front of our throttle body. And now this just pops right out. When you remove the cover that has the air intake that goes over the throttle body, there is an extra little small cord that has a connection that gets plugged in right here. Make sure you keep that clean. Don't let that get covered with filth. And then you've got decent access to the first couple cylinders. However, getting to cylinder number 2, which is the very first one, is extremely difficult with the way that some of the piping and wiring goes around it. And I found that one to be the most problematic of all of them. The cylinder number 4, which is the next one back, was a little bit difficult, but not too bad. And the last two were very easy and straightforward. However, the passenger side front tire had to be removed and come up through the wheel well to be able to get to those sockets, or those plugs, as well as replacing the wires. In this case here, when I was pulling out the wires, and I actually had a couple that ended up breaking on me. So if you're doing plugs, you absolutely must replace the wires. There's not really a good reason not to, especially if you're at the mileage to be thinking about plugs. You need to be thinking about wires anyway. And so you also may want a creeper, some rubber gloves. You do not need a 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch size sockets or breaker bars. You also may need you may want an inspection camera just to verify everything's seated properly. And that's about it. Just make sure you have some patience and give yourself time to be able to make this repair. But all in all, you can do the repair for about $100 in parts between the wires, the plugs, dielectric grease, and anti-seize. But just be prepared to spend some time patiently working through it, as well as you'll have to replace the clip on the sensor that goes from the air intake and pop that off to get that removed. And then on the odd cylinder, the very first one, cylinder number 1, there is a cable that is, it's probably hard to see here on camera down there, to get at the actual plug that you have to remove, and that comes off with a clip, and you might want another long-handled fine-bladed screwdriver or a little point to get to it. So relatively simple repair. Just make sure it requires patience and time, and that's the reason, probably the best reason I can give you for why there's not a full repair video on this on YouTube. I was trying to do one, and it just was not going to work, because a few of the spark plugs I had to put in actually by feel, by hand, blindly, so I could get the torque I needed by contorting my body where I couldn't see the plug, and just put it in entirely by feel, and that just doesn't make for a great video for anyone to sit around and watch. But since I couldn't pull off the video, I hope that you found this useful if you're needing to replace spark plugs. You also may want to have an OBD2 meter for your test drive, just to verify you did everything right and you don't end up with a cylinder misfire. I ended up accidentally not getting one of the plugs wires pushed in all the way and had a P302 cylinder 2 misfire that I had to just get the plug boot popped on correctly, and that corrected that relatively easily. And on my first test drive, I'd actually forgotten to reattach the plug that goes to the air cover, and I was getting a couple errors on that. Once I read the code on my code reader, it was relatively straightforward, and I felt like an idiot for not getting it connected. But just simple things like that a code reader can actually save you the headache to make sure everything is done correctly and up to snuff. So obviously I've got the decorative cover off right now, but I'm going to put that on next, and that will be the final thing to call this spark plug change done.